Hey, and welcome back to the Career Cravings Podcast. Today, we're talking about something that is the number one dreaded response after an interview that we all have received and all hate collectively, which is we went with a more qualified candidate. So the truth is that at this stage, there are ways to prevent the employer from saying no strategically, like 80% of the time. And this comes down to something I like to call the blind spot, which today we're diving into fully. I'm going to teach you my blind spot method to create confident interview responses so that you stop hearing we went with someone more qualified, because at the end of the day, if they called you from your resume, you are qualified and they called you for a reason. So today I'm going to be breaking down how to stop employers from saying no or that dreaded we went with someone else. This one shift changed my entire career. And this is exactly what I teach all of my clients as well, so that they can have more confident interview responses to those most dreaded questions. So I'm going to break it all down today. Let's dive in. Hey, it's Irina Pozan, and welcome back to the Career Cravings Podcast. This podcast has a simple mission. It's to help ambitious professionals like you build the career and life that you've been craving. Over the past 15 years, I've worked as an HR leader, designed hiring systems, led recruitment teams, and I've sat on the other side of the hiring table. I've seen what works in today's job market, what doesn't, and what separates those good candidates from the ones that actually land their dream roles. Now I'm bringing everything I've learned straight to you. Each episode is packed with actionable insights and tools to help you land your dream role sooner. Now let's dive in. All right. So in order to really explain what a blind spot is, I got to take you back, because this story is really going to illustrate what in the world I'm talking about. Okay. So I will never forget the day that I got called in for my dream interview. So I was early on in my career and I landed an interview with a top organization, and I was left wondering, why did they call me for an interview? Because I didn't have the leadership experience that they required at that HR manager role. And I didn't have many of the competencies that were listed on the job description, or so I thought. And I was all in my head thinking, okay, this is a dream company. They have so many options. They have 300 other applicants. Why did they pick me? And what I heard myself in my brain telling myself is, I don't have a degree yet. They're not going to hire me. I don't have the leadership experience. They're not going to hire me. I don't check all of the boxes. What am I even doing here? And those things were all what I call the blind spot. Okay. So it is factually true that for a role where they would love you to be a leader, it is important to have leadership skills. This is something that they're often screening for. It's something that's probably on the job description. And if it is a skill that's on the job description and you don't have it, this is called a blind spot. Or your blind spot, these are the most common ones. Your blind spot could be your education. Maybe you don't have your degree yet in that subject, which was the case for me as well. So I was worried that they were going to ask me about this because I didn't have my leadership, or I didn't have my degree completed just yet. I only had my college diploma. And maybe you're thinking, okay, I'm new to the country, or I have a gap on my resume. All of these items are blind spots. Blind spots are what I like to call, they're like the thing that you would want literally no one to ask you about at all. You want them to skip that interview question. It's what you're kind of the most nervous about. You'd love to talk about all of the other things on your resume. That is what the blind spot is. Now, before the manager that was interviewing me could even say no, what I had done is actually go back and think about each one of those blind spots for that role. And what I did was prepare responses for each one of the things I was really, really afraid that they would ask me. And this is where my confidence really shifted. And I heard myself whisper to myself internally that I am ready for this. And I decided that I was. And I walked in confidently. I spoke differently because of that. I was able to lead with value, show them why they should hire me, and I ended up getting the job. And while I was worried that I wasn't even qualified yet for that role, what actually happened behind the scenes was a year later, I was promoted. So while I thought I was just lucky to have that role, I was promoted from that role. And the lesson here was that you don't have to be the perfect candidate, but you do need to know how to talk about the things you're the least confident about so that you turn those blind spots around in order to stop hearing we went with a more qualified candidate. So I'm going to break this all down and how you can address each one of these as well. So if we break down what a blind spot is, it's really something that you can see would prevent you from getting the job. Okay. So the blind spot is something like I'm new to the country. I don't have American experience yet. I don't have Canadian experience yet. I haven't led a team yet. How will I get that director role? I'm not technical enough. I have a gap. So these are all things that could be blind spots. Or maybe you don't have like a specific skill, right? And you're worried that they're going to ask you about this. So these are factual things. The way I like to look at it is with every client that comes on, this is what I do. I look at their resume and I literally ask myself, why would this person not be hired? And that isn't negative. That's literally being realistic. Like, why would you not be hired for your target role? Why would they not pick you? And everyone has one. So in my own career, I gave you the example of when I was going for that first leadership role. I never had any leadership experience and I only had 5 years of working experience and they were looking for 8 to 10. So these were things that I addressed as my blind spot and I was able to focus on them so that I can do better in the interview. And I'll say that if you landed the interview, you already know that they like your profile, they like your resume, they like you. And now they're asking these questions. So the way that I would think of a blind spot is it is not a red flag because they have already called you, but the way in which you answer that question will either be a red flag or it won't. Okay. So say you're dealing with the I haven't led a team before blind spot. Okay. As an example, if you know this is the number one reason they would not hire you for that role, amazing. They have already called you. They liked you. They realize that you likely don't have that leadership experience because it wouldn't say it on your resume that you do. And now it's time to really reflect on like all of the reasons they wouldn't hire you. So if you've come down to that reason, amazing. The next step would be proactively addressing it. And we're going to talk about this next. Now, maybe you have a gap on your resume and you're thinking, okay, someone would not hire me because I haven't been working for the last 6 months. They're going to wonder about that. Now, a seasoned recruiter is always going to dig into the blind spots. Literally any good recruiter is going to do this. I would do this. I would literally look at a resume and think, okay, why would I not hire this person? And what do I need to ask them about in the interview? And at this point, or you haven't responded yet. So it is not negative. They are literally thinking about, okay, this is something I want to know. This is not a red flag yet. They just want to ask you about it. Now, depending on how you answer the blind spot question will determine whether or not you're going to move to the next interview stage. So if they ask you about your gap and you haven't worked in 6 months, if you have a lofty answer and you're like, well, the job market was hard and so on, then once you don't have a great response, that is when that becomes an actual red flag and probably the reason you're going to hear, we went with a more qualified candidate, right? So to avoid that, what we need to do is first become aware of our blind spots because we all have them. I have never met the perfect candidate. I've met some great candidates, but everyone has something where, of course, we could be better. So figuring out what your number 1 or 2 blind spots are. Okay, so you can take the time to do that after this, or you could do it right now. You could literally pause this episode and reflect. Why is it? Is it because you're new to the country? Is it because you've never landed that role before? Is it because you're pivoting into another part of your work now? Identify what that blind spot is so that the awareness can help you in that next phase. So literally, I want you to think about why would they say no to you? If you're walking into the interview, and you're thinking, okay, if I don't get this job, it's literally because of this one thing. What is it? Okay. Now, the next step is identifying the question behind the question. So I always love to think about the question behind the question because it helps you draft your interview response for that. So say you have your blind spot. It's the fact that you have a resume gap. You're new to the country. You don't have leadership experience. You don't have a specific skill. Let's say on your resume, like data and analytics using a specific tool. Identify what those blind spots are. And then I want you to think about why are they asking that question? So In the gap example, they would be asking you like, hey, Susie, why do you have a gap on your resume? Why, what were you up to in this 6-month period? Can you tell me more about that? Now, this is your dreaded question because you're sort of like, I hope they wouldn't have noticed that. I hope they don't ask me about that. That's not what I want to talk about. Totally get it. But you are strategic and you're going to be prepared because that's how we do things around here in the Career Cravings way. So think about, why are they asking that question? What kind of red flag could this be for the company? And in that example where you have a gap, the risk is, okay, if you're a terrible employee and let's say you were terminated because you were a terrible employee, they want to understand that. And then they also want to understand, like, why has it been so hard for you to get a job in the last 6 months? Is this a red flag for us? Is this someone who is not hireable? So they ask you these questions to understand your mindset and to really address and try to understand whether or not they can put you forward to the next interview stage. So until a response comes out of your mouth, it is not a red flag yet. It is literally just information. They already see the gap, and that's why they identified it, and that's why they want to ask you about it. Now, let's think about the question behind the question of, okay, can you tell me about a time that you've led a team? And when the answer is that you haven't, how do you answer that? And why are they asking you this? So if the role requires you to lead a team, then they want to know that you're going to be a good leader. And the way to typically know that is past leadership experience, right? Our past behaviors determine our future behaviors. So if they ask you about your leadership experience, they're going to know whether or not you're going to piss the rest of the team off when you come on board, or whether you're going to be an amazing manager that everyone loves and wants to work hard for and stay around with, right? The other example of new to the country, right? So if they ask you like, hey, do you have any experience working in North America? Or a question along those lines, they're trying to understand, okay, is this someone who knows the labor laws within the country? Is this someone who knows what the culture is like in this country, right? So they're trying to assess whether or not you would be successful at the end of the day, and if there's any red flags about that. So understanding why they are asking this question will help you draft the perfect response in the next stage and get you from hearing like, we went with someone else, to doing the best that you possibly can to explain the blind spot in a way where you're in control of it and you can gauge how that next step in the conversation is. So I'll tell you, most candidates think about the questions they don't want to be asked, but then they just leave it there and they're like, well, hopefully they don't ask me that. Or like, if they ask me that, I'm screwed. And then as soon as they're asked, they come up with a response that isn't very appealing to the recruiter, and then they don't end up hearing back on that role, right? After you've understood what your blind spots are and why they're asking, the next stage is to draft a super confident response so they know that you are a great candidate for this role. Right? Most candidates will skip this part. They literally will not draft a great response that they're confident in. And then when they're asked, they get all nervous. Their voice is shaking. They don't sound confident. They don't sound believable. And then afterwards, they never hear back. They get ghosted. So with that, we want to draft a perfect response. So if we look at the blind spot of being new to the country as another example, what you would want to do is convey that you have experience in the area that they're hiring for that is global and it's applicable, okay? And you would want to draft an interview response that addresses that. So for example, if you're asked, have you ever worked in North America before? You could say something like, I have 10 years of global experience in the exact same areas of the job description. So then you would list them. You would say something like, I have over a decade of experience in dealing with data and analytics and XYZ, whatever is on their job description. And then I would say, while I don't yet have North American experience, I have worked for a decade for global organizations doing the exact same tasks. And then what you would want to do is prove to them that you are someone who is able to learn quickly, right? So then you can say, in the past, I supported a new country here. And then you can kind of explain a story that shows you're someone who's a quick learner, you've learned tough things before, and you're confident that you can do it again. We are officially in the biggest hiring season of the year, January and enrollment for HR Star is officially open. HR Star is my signature coaching program for HR professionals who want to land their next HR roles as soon as possible. And many do in as little as 3 weeks, up to 3 months. And the results are literally guaranteed so that it's a no-brainer. When you hop into HR Star before doors close on February 2nd, you will be receiving $3,000 in bonuses, a bonus one-to-one coaching session, a full resume transformation, a custom pitch, and a live LinkedIn audit to match your new brand story. And I've opened up a 12-month payment plan option to make the decision a no-brainer. If you have been loving all of the testimonials that you are hearing and success stories from HR Star, then it is officially your turn to hop in. Spots are limited and doors close on February 2nd. Go grab your seat, and I cannot wait to support you. The link is in the show notes. Now, with a gap, if your blind spot is a gap, what I would do is draft a response that sounds confident, that shows that you have been working on something in between opportunities, and that your last employer, that relationship went really well. So it will be like a positive response. And I like to phrase this like a positive sandwich. So I love to start with something like, the last 5 years have been incredible working at company X. Now, unfortunately, I have been affected by a layoff just like many others in the tech industry, and now I'm ready for my next challenge. When I saw this role, I got really excited because of X, Y, Z. And this way, you are telling them that you've been laid off and addressing the gap. Now, what you will also want to add, depending on how they ask the question, is what you've been doing in the interim while you've been between opportunities. So what have you been doing that is productive? Have you taken any courses? Have you been to networking events? What is it that you've been up to that makes you more ready for the next role? Or you can say something like, I've taken the last 6 months to be really intentional about the next opportunity that I dive into. And with that, I'm really excited for our conversation today. This role sounds like the perfect fit for me, right? So what I don't want you to say with that blind spot response is the job market's been really hard. It's been really hard to land any interviews. And because of that, I have really been struggling and, going into anything like that. Like, yes, I've been applying for 6 months, but nothing's happening. That's happening with many people. You don't want to get into any of that. I'm going to give you a third example, the one that I brought up at the start of the call, which is my personal example. So I have two. So the one blind spot that I had was that I had no leadership experience. And preparing for that interview, I realized that this is something that might come up through the interview process. And I made a list of all of the ways that I have been able to display leadership skills without formally leading a team. So I talked about projects that I've led. I've talked about results that I was able to receive through others without formally being a leader. Because the truth is, we are all leaders, right? So even before we become leaders of people, we are leading things. We are leading projects. We are leading our own selves to get incredible results at work. We are leading clients. So there's so many ways that you can show up as a leader. So what I did was make a list of all of the projects that I led successfully. And one of the things that I said in my interview was like, while I haven't formally led a team, HR is a really unique role where you are leading clients all the time. So I have been leading and making recommendations to clients for the last 5 years. So this is not going to be new to me. This is something that just has a different approach. So that's kind of the way that I approach that question. And the other blind spot that I had was education. So I, at the time, had my diploma completed. I didn't have my degree completed. And before going into that interview, I assessed the blind spot that they might ask, like for the university degree, because it was something that was on the job description. Now, I'm glad I applied anyway, because in the end, they actually never even asked me about that. And during the reference check process, once I got the job, they literally didn't care. I wrote that, the education that I did have, and they literally didn't care, and they hired me anyway, because most people are not hired for their education. They're hired for their experience. And actually a trend that I believe we're going to continue to see in the future is with the rise of AI, education will become less and less and less and less and less important, because literally anyone at any time can get any information in their fingertips. So to have like a super high education on a very specific topic is going to be less and less relevant because we can all learn things very, very quickly on the job, on the fly, if it's required. So our pace of learning is really, really going up. I'm not glad that I let it stress me out to the point where I thought maybe I shouldn't apply or maybe they wouldn't hire me because of it. But I did prepare a response just in case it came up. Now, I never recommend to anyone to bring up their blind spots proactively. We don't want to focus on the things that will get us to be disqualified from the interviews or not get the offer. What we do want to do is be intentional in reflection, being realistic about what those things are, and then creating a really great response that keeps in mind why the person would be asking that question in the first place so that we can address some of their fears about hiring us. Because if you think about it, the blind spot with the education piece, what are they worried about? They're worried you might not know about that topic, right? Or they're worried that maybe you're not someone who's able to execute on having the focus to finish an education or something like that. So getting to the root of it and creating a response is going to be super helpful in doing that. Now, I don't remember the exact response that I had for that degree question, but I was going to explain the education that I did have. So what I was going to say, if I was asked, which I never was, I finished a 3-year diploma and learned so much about business and HR. It was great. Now, I'm someone who wanted to hit the ground running and started working as soon as possible to start getting as much experience on the job as possible because I thought that is the absolute best way I'm going to learn. And that's exactly what I did. I graduated after 3 years. I didn't go to finish the degree. And instead, I started working and I got even more experience than people would have at my age or something like that. Then the other thing that I would have said is my degree is actually in progress. So I have started it, it's in progress, and I look forward to finishing it in 2 years or whenever that degree would be finished. Now, having an education piece in progress on your resume is amazing because it shows that you have goals. It shows that you are working towards something, you're learning something new. And sometimes, depending on who you're speaking to, that is just as important. Now, I will say education is something that is more important for some roles, and sometimes it is not something that's looked past. So if that's the case, then all right, like for example, you can't become a doctor without the right education. Totally get it. That is not a blind spot. That is literally a derailer. Okay, at that point, I don't think anyone would call you back for that interview. But where it is kind of like an option and they've called you and you have the chance to explain that blind spot, then this is the 3-step process that I want you to take. So I'll give you another case study example just to make it real for you. My client, Ekta, who I had the pleasure of supporting 2 years ago, her blind spot was being new to the country, right? And she was getting 0 callbacks, even though she was wonderful. As soon as I met her, I'm like, oh my goodness, if we can get you on interviews, they're going to love you. And when we started working together, I saw that the blind spot was that she wasn't talking about her global experience in a way that was going to get her hired in North America. We changed that. We changed her resume. She ended up getting 2 offers in 30 days, which is completely nuts. And nothing about her profile changed, but the way in which she described her experience definitely changed. So I will say that you do not have to be the perfect candidate to get hired. It is not the most qualified person on paper that gets the job, but the person that can really strategically address the blind spots in a way where it doesn't raise any red flags with the recruiter has a significantly higher chance than the candidate that doesn't know why they're being asked that question, gets super nervous, and doesn't have a great interview response. So, of course, we have homework here. And you also know that every single job seeker has blind spots. You have them, I had them, everyone does for the role that they're looking for. But what separates the people that actually get hired is simple. It's they understand why they're being asked that question. They answer compassionately and strategically. They know how to answer those questions confidently. I love, by the way, when my clients come to me with their blind spot and I change their responses, I write their interview responses for them on our coaching calls, and everything goes really, really differently in the next set of interviews for them. And this is because of human psychology. A recruiter and a hiring manager can sense when they ask you something and you're super nervous about it, they can sense that they probably shouldn't have confidence that this isn't a deal breaker, right? So they end up moving forward with someone else who maybe interviews a little bit better, who is more confident in their responses, or someone that doesn't have that gap or that blind spot. So here is your homework. Think about what reasons, if you look at your resume, think about what reasons would employers not hire you. Write them down. Then I want you to sort through, okay, what are the actual facts? What are the fears that this hiring manager or recruiter would have about hiring someone with that profile? And how can you prove to them through a confident interview response that in fact you can be the best person for the job? How can you prove that although you don't have a specific set of experiences, you can still do the role incredibly well? So those are the three things I want you to think about. And I'll give you one last example because you know I love an example and it makes things so much more real. I had this client, Takunda, and she actually left a really amazing Google review. So you can go look at that as well on my Google page. But Takunda's story was really interesting because she was going into this interview and her blind spot, she had multiple, but the one we were focused on where I'm like, okay, Takunda, why do you think they would not hire you for this role? And she said, well, part of the role has labor relations experience. Now, if you guys don't know what labor relations is, it's unionized experience, basically working with unions, working inside of a unionized company. And I asked her, I'm like, okay, why would they not hire you based on that? We got to the root of why, what the fear would be. You know, they would have to train her on that skill and so on and so forth. And what we did was draft a response for her that was super confident. And guess what? She ended up landing that offer that on the actual job description, it said they want unionized experience. She did not have it. She explained it through a confident interview response. And they were like, okay, cool. Like, we know you'll have to learn about this. This is new to you, but we're confident that you are great at learning new skills. And we're also confident that you have all of the other skills we were looking for. So we're going to go ahead and hire you. And she was shocked. She was like, oh my goodness. When I told them that, you know, I didn't have that specific experience, but here's what I had. And I gave them that confident response. They were like, okay, cool. And they just continued on with the interview and ended up hiring her. So that is actually the role she is in today when she thought she was not qualified based on that number one skill. So what I want you to not do is disqualify yourself before you even go into that interview. We never want that to happen because there are so many opportunities. Like if I did that in my own career, I literally wouldn't have landed any job. If I looked at, you know, what women typically do, which is look at a job description and think, okay, if I don't qualify even for 10% of this, I shouldn't apply. If I did that, if I didn't push myself out of my comfort zone and apply for the role anyway, I wouldn't have had any of the dream jobs that I've landed. I wouldn't have the director role. I wouldn't have had the manager role. I wouldn't have even landed my first HR role. Because at some point, there will be things that you are not perfectly aligned for. Like, for example, getting your first job, you have literally no experience at all. But someone has to give you the chance and someone has to look at you and think, all right, although this person doesn't have X, Y, or Z, I'm confident that they're the right person because I could tell they're smart. I could tell I can teach this to them. I can train them. And it, you know, within 6 months, they're going to be fully confident on that piece. And that is something that you can control through your interviews. And that is exactly why to land an offer, instead of hearing, we went with a more qualified candidate, to actually land the offer, that's why mastering your interviews is so, so important. This is exactly why with my clients, after we have their resume completed, after they're landing interviews, which is amazing, 90% of the time, what we're working on is those interview skills because they change the whole process. The better we can all be at interviewing, the better chances we are going to have in creating more opportunities for ourselves. I've also had clients that literally were pivoting into a field, like my client Kayla, who's been on this podcast before and landed 2 offers in 30 days, even though she literally had no experience at all in that field. And she was working in a different field most recently, but she was able to answer those questions confidently in a way where she believed it, the recruiter believed it, And then she literally got 2 offers in such a quick period. So these things happen all the time once we know how to master our interview skills. So good luck. Let me know how you do in going through that reflection process to understand your blind spots, to understand why they're being asked, to understand how to position your responses in the most qualified ways. So what will start to happen is instead of hearing we went with another candidate or you get ghosted, what you'll start hearing is, hey, we'd love to see you at the next interview on Friday. How does that sound? Right? So interviewing is a skill. Interviewing well builds connection with the person that you're speaking to. And the more connections we can build, the more bridges and options that we have. So I'd love to know if this episode resonated with you. I'd also love to hear what your blind spot is. We all have them. There is literally zero shame in that. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode. We are officially in the biggest hiring season of the year, January, and enrollment for HR Star is officially open. HR Star is my signature coaching program for HR professionals who want to land their next HR roles as soon as possible. And many do in as little as 3 weeks, up to 3 months. And the results are literally guaranteed so that it's a no-brainer. When you hop into HR Star before doors close on February 2nd, you will be receiving $3,000 in bonuses, a bonus one-to-one coaching session, a full resume transformation, a custom pitch, and a live LinkedIn audit to match your new brand story. And I've opened up a 12-month payment plan option to make the decision a no-brainer. If you have been loving all of the testimonials that you are hearing and success stories from HR Star, then it is officially your turn to hop in. Spots are limited and doors close on February 2nd. Go grab your seat and I cannot wait to support you. The link is in the show notes. Hey, before you go, if you've enjoyed listening to today's show, I would love your support. Please take a moment to leave a review anywhere where you listen to podcasts. And here's the exciting part. I'm running a special contest and giving away a one-on-one session with yours truly. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and send it to me in my DMs. All of my contact info is in the show notes. I appreciate you so much, and I cannot wait to build the career and life that you've been craving together. See you next week.